to all the boys who had to learn to play by different rules. Diversity. What comes to mind? Black and white, maybe brown? What about food or even language? How about art? I think you've gotten the idea. So I propose another question. How often are they good? And what makes them good? What makes them well done? Let's think of the Disney reimaginations. A lot of people have problems with them. Is that because of the way it's done, or because they're done at all? Whatever the reason, Disney says it's to diversify the princesses, but also fight racial stigmatisms. Let's backtrack for a second to the second question I asked. Is it done well? To start, let us look at Frog and Toad, a fun kid's book that you have almost certainly read at some point in your life. Just as a side note, it is also on the banned list. The author Arnold Lobel wrote the story Frog and Toad are friends. It was an immediate hit, winning the Caldecott, and the second Frog and Toad together winning the Newbery. However, there's much debate in the meaning of Frog and Toad. Mainly, are they gay? Well, soon after the book's publishing, Arnold came out to his wife after being diagnosed with AIDS. His daughter, Andrine Lobel, once said that Frog and Toad are, quote, of the same sex, and they love each other. It was quite ahead of its time in that respect. I think Frog and Toad really was the beginning of him coming out, end quote. So in that context, they definitely are. It's not hard to see the subtle nods to the life that Arnold dreamed of having, one that I get to have. What am I going to do? I'm so ashamed. Ashamed of what? My mother said. Of loving Dante? I'm a guy, he's a guy. It's not the way things are supposed to be, Mom. I know, she said. Ophelia taught me some things, all those letters. I've learned some things, and your father's right. You can't run, not from Dante. So then, what does this mean for writing characters? Well, according to the Journal of Homosexuality, yes, that's a thing, quote, from the 1960s to the present, gay males, lesbians, and bisexuals have been stereotypically portrayed as funny clowns, flaming queers, queens, villainous criminals, mental patients, child molesters, and vampires, or even victims of violence, HIV and AIDS, and gender and sexuality identity disorder victims, end quote. This is what the world sees. I know this isn't true, and so do many of you. But when this is the characters being written, and this is all you see, this becomes your opinion. This is why we hear things like, that's a gay show for straight people. This is because they lean into those stereotypes. Love Victor, a popular show on Hulu, is a great example of this concept. As a Latina media company explains, quote, the guy who cheats on his straight girlfriend with another guy and comes out as gay is one of the oldest stereotypes in media, but not one that needs repeating. Cheating is bad in any context, but when it makes gay men, and subsequently anyone who falls under the LGBTQ+ umbrella, look like hypersexual manipulators, it's a trope I find myself turning away from, especially as someone who identifies as bisexual. I'm no stranger to us being painted as people who can't make up their minds, or disguise infidelity as experimentation, or refuse to commit to one relationship at a time, end quote. Unfortunately, as much as I know this show did many great things, like being the first show to have an actual main gay character, I agree with this statement. The entire first season is spent with him battling his sexuality, and that's a great thing, but it comes at the expense of somebody else, and that paints a really negative light on gay people and anybody in the LGBTQ community. So where do we go from here? Well, let's move on to what is the most significant book in the LGBTQ+ community, and to me. Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the universe. Why is this still the most important and significant book? Well, to speak on the topic more, I invited my friend, Dr. Scott Savage of Education. Question 1. What do you remember feeling when you were reading Aristotle and Dante for the first time? Dr. Savage. I remember thinking I had no access or knowledge to this type of literature growing up, that it's a wonderful coming-of-age story that I would have benefited from in my early 20s. Growing up in rural Appalachia, we were never presented to any LGBTQ+ characters, or any literature like this to examine. It wasn't until my early 30s that I started reading books like this in this genre. Question 2. What do you think makes Aristotle and Dante so significant and different from other LGBTQ+ books you have read? Dr. Savage. I think this book is different than other LGBTQ books because it explores an underrepresented minority within the gay community, that being one of Hispanic or Latino background. The book is also unique in though it explores other tough issues that teens may experience. I think that it is important to show depth. The gay characters are not simply one-dimensional. That, in addition to dealing with issues unique to the LGBTQ+ experience, we also deal with multiple challenges growing up and developing our own personal identities. Question 3. What makes a good LGBTQ book, and why would young readers need to read them? Dr. Savage. I'm a little biased in my opinion because I love a romantic ending, but a good LGBTQ+ novel should have realistic characters that deal with the realistic challenges. I enjoy books like Red, White, and Royal Blue, but it's very hard relating to stereotypical Ken dolls with power and money. Another book I really enjoyed was Like a Love Story by Abid Nazemian. This novel depicts an individual from Iranian background and his struggles with his identity in the 1980s during the AIDS crisis. It's important to teach and remember how important that time was for LGBTQ+ community and the nation. Overall, as I mentioned, there are still pockets in this country where young readers need to know their feelings are valid, and they're not alone. We need to show young readers that the world isn't so black and white, right or left. There's a lot of gray area. Within the gray area, everyone should be free to explore their own happiness and discover their own self-worth. So, what does all this mean? Well, as Dr. Savage mentioned, characters. The characters are in the story is what matters. The story it's telling has to be relatable. The characters have to be multi-dimensional. Without further ado, let's take a look at Aristotle and Dante. We start the book with two people who are polar opposites. As Benjamin Senes writes, quote, Dante can swim, Ari can't, end quote. For me, that's what makes this book so perfect to show how to make good relationships. They don't get together until the very last page. The whole book is about how Dante is finding himself, and Ari is scared to step too far out into the world. It builds and builds and builds until finally the resolution comes on the last page. And the first of many groundbreaking grand climaxes is only on page 301 out of a total of 359. This is what allows it to be so monumental. It feels earned. I care about Aristotle and Dante, and they feel real. I can feel a little part of my own journey in them. If I am totally honest with you, I was really scared when book 2 mentioned it's going to focus more on the sex part of a relationship. I was worried that it would stray too much into a kind of story I didn't want to see those two characters in. And this brings me back to Frog and Toad. People wonder if they're gay, not because there's explicit material that says they are, but because they're in love. True love, real love, passionate love. We all have people, even friends, that we feel that kind of love about. And as I write my book, that is what I will focus on more than anything else. Making sure that the love between my two characters actually feels real and like a love that we all strive to achieve. You can symbolize love through sex, but you cannot make a reader love your characters because they had sex. How could I have ever been ashamed of loving Dante Quintana?